Chapter 26. The simple fact is, we are at war. Rich finished his double espresso and delicately dabbed his lips with a napkin. Our borders are open gates, and the enemy are already here. And yet we welcome them with open arms while we grind our own people into the dirt. His eyes burned into Sean's as he spoke. Sean wasn't sure if some response was required. He said hesitantly. They sat on folding chairs outside a coffee van in the shadow of the National Gallery and looked out across Trafalgar Square. Sean, Rich, and Malcolm wearing the same hard bastard look as he had the week before. The square was thick with tourists, all vying for photographs, swarming slowly around the fountains and Nelson's Column and the 4 giant lions. It was a warm day. The only blessing on the Underground had been the blasts of cool air as the trains punched their way out of the tunnels and into the stations, and the tall buildings trapped the heat and made it almost suffocating. A couple of pairs of armed cops were on a slow patrol, bulky in body armour with Heckler and Koch MP5s cradled casually in their arms. The amount of flesh on show in the crowd was both good and bad, depending on where Sean looked. There were some fit girls about, and on a normal day he would have enjoyed eyeing them up, and they might have eyed him back, if he hadn't been sitting with one guy who could have been his dad and another who looked like he hated them all. Rich had been waiting by the coffee van, which looked more vintage vehicle than state-of-the-art cafe. They were served by a man wearing an expertly manicured pencil-thin moustache and a striped apron. It was all about as fake as Rich himself. With MI5's briefing in mind, and as he wasn't pissed this time, Sean was seeing Rich in a different light. It was like all the smiles and posh accent and general hospitality were a thin plastic shell over something deeper and far worse. The smile was now thin and cold, and the eyes above it were hiding something. Sean didn't want to know what, but he had to try and find out. "You don't sound convinced," Rich observed. The smile was colder. "I'm sorry," said Sean. "I just didn't realize there was a war on." He had reported this meeting via the phone to Adams and the spooks. The answer had been simple. Report back ASAP afterwards. So, not a lot to work with. He wanted to get Rich talking, which meant questions. But too many questions can start to sound like doubt, and he didn't like to think what Rich might do to doubters. Was he saying the right or the wrong things? Shit, it was like walking through a minefield. Rich looked around, and his eyes settled on someone. If we weren't at war, would there be people like him around? Sean followed the nod of his head. A homeless guy was shambling through the crowd. He was ragged and grubby, his clothes betraying a life spent on the streets. The bags he pulled behind him on a broken trolley were his only possessions. By his side, a little dog trotted along, attached to him by a lead made from a piece of frayed rope. "Sure there would," Sean said, "because there'll always be rich tossers who don't give a shit." Rich stood up abruptly. He clicked his fingers at Malcolm, who slipped his hand inside his jacket and handed over a black wallet. Rich pulled out a thick wad of notes, 20s by the look of it, and handed them to the man with the dog. The homeless guy looked down at them, looked up at Rich, looked back at the money. Rich stepped away deliberately, hands held out as if to disown the cash. The man shuffled off at a surprising speed, the wad magically disappearing before Malcolm could beat him up and take it back again. Rich returned to his seat. "Well," he said softly, "apparently I'm a rich tosser who does." Nice performance, Sean thought. He somehow couldn't see Rich handing out money to every poor guy he passed. He wondered if he had successfully steered between two minds, or was standing poised with one foot just resting on the trigger mechanism. He said. He tried again. "Look, I hope you understand that, well, I've been dicked about by people in authority before. I need to really know that you're different, and unless you're all about free handouts to homeless dudes, I have no idea what you even stand for. I know what you like and what you don't like, but I don't know what your cause is." A light flickered in Rich's eyes, like a flame in a furnace. "Our cause is simple, Harker," he said. "To make the public want what we want. A Britain where no decent person has any need to be afraid, but where life is intolerable for those who are not decent. In short, the exact opposite of what we have now. Does that sound so bad?" No, Sean had to admit it didn't. Not put like that. Not if you didn't know exactly how Rich intended to achieve that aim, through terror and murder. Rich stood and cast his hands wide to gesture at the whole square. "This place stands for everything that's wrong with this country. Built to commemorate our greatest ever naval victory, a victory that should have made Britain secure forever. And now look at it. A tourist trap full of people conned into thinking they're protected, when in reality they are little more than slaves for exploitation, a commodity to be bought and sold on the lies of self-serving politicians." He sat down again. "Picture 1,000,000 citizens marching on Downing Street, fed up with the terror, wanting only peace and security. Our politicians will be forced to deliver or face revolution. The military on the streets, suspension of civil liberties, democracy restricted to those who have earned the right to vote. That is our cause." And that is the real Rich speaking, Sean thought. Thanks for clearing that up. Rich's eyes bored deep into his, and he returned the stare. Fortunately, he knew how. He'd had practice with the meth-crazed psychos back on Lytton Mills. Stare them down, but stay neutral. Don't give them anything to latch onto. And Rich was just as crazed. It was just that the stuff turning his brain to scrambled eggs was ideas, not drugs. Sean now knew exactly what he was dealing with. Rich was mad, as was anyone who was involved with him and believed his shit. "Now I have a task for you," Rich said, his eyes still on Sean. Okay." Sean made himself pay attention. "You going to give us the next job, then?" Rich shook his head gently and smiled like a cat at the mouse whose tail it had just caught under its paw. He nodded to Malcolm, who slid an envelope across the table. Sean opened it and immediately recognized the Monty. "That," said Rich, "is your objective." Sean felt his throat dry up as though a hot coal had been forced into his mouth. He had to swallow several times just to get something like words out. "Objective? How do you mean?" "I mean what any of your officers would mean if they described something as an objective." He let it sink in for a second while Sean stared at the photo. Shit and fuck. Objective meant target. He was going to be expected to attack this place. "Consider it a little test of our relationship, to ensure that my trust is not misplaced. Let us not delude ourselves. We both know you became involved in our cause through the desire to make a little more money, not through your deep-seated convictions. Whatever it is that drives you, Sean Harker, I need to know that when I require something of you, you will deliver." Sean held up the photo. "But thank God he had the phone on him. He could feel it in his pocket. He had to find 30 seconds to call up Adams, spill the plan, once he knew what the hell the plan was. "Let me describe the rest of the day to you," Rich was saying. "You will return to Andover with Malcolm and do as he tells you." His eyes bored into Sean's. "No offence. You understand why you must be supervised." Sean swallowed. "Goes without saying," he croaked. Rich gave a simple nod of satisfaction. "Malcolm will escort you to a safe place. At 10 p.m. he will take you to the target and provide you with the means for accomplishing your task. It will be well within your skill set. Afterwards, and you have my word on this, responsibility will be claimed by some little-known jihadist group." "But soldiers," Sean stuttered. Soldiers were 99% of the Monty's clientele. "Why? You can't just kill—" "Our cause must be advanced," Rich said, eyes burning. "Remember, the purpose of this is to mobilize our government into action against IS and our other enemies. Soldiers are trained to fight and to die. There will not be one man or woman in that pub who would not lay down their life for their country if their duty called for it, and that is what will happen." Sean knew he couldn't refuse. But the Sean they thought he was, the recruited patriot, the East London lad, not the guy forced to work for MI5, still wouldn't just give in, so this Sean didn't either. "I can't," Rich sighed. And Malcolm slid another envelope towards him. Another photograph. Sean stared at it. "This is my—" "Yes, it's your mother," Rich confirmed. "She was behind the counter at the shop, passing a bag over to some bloke. No idea that she was a star of her own exclusive photo shoot. She, too, could be an unfortunate victim of the kind of people we're fighting, you know. You've seen the videos these murdering filth like to post. The mother of a serving soldier would really get people talking, wouldn't it?" Rich stood up. "I will expect to hear from Malcolm at 10:30 p.m. And of course, I'll be watching the results on the national news shortly after." Malcolm rose to his feet and jerked his thumb. Sean, sick to his stomach, got up to follow him.